Betak venue for this very exciting session, A Patient Assassin. Just to let you know that Anita Anand will be signing her books after the session. So we go out of the tent to the left towards the Mughal tent area, and that's where our book signing is. And Aanchal Malhotra will also be there signing any books if you would like to bring them to her. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming to the stage Anita Anand and Aanchal Malhotra.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see a full house. So I'm just going to tell you the flow of the event before I introduce Anita and her wonderful book. I'll introduce the book, then Anita will give a little presentation about Udham Singh and the writing of the book, and then we'll have a quick conversation and then open it up to audience questions. So, without further ado, really Anita Anand needs no introduction because we all know her work on Sophia Singh and also the Koh-i-Noor, but I should say that she is a journalist for the BBC and writes on Indian history. But this book is special. This book commemorates the story of Jallianwala Bagh, whose centenary we celebrated last year in 2019. And it's a very important story because it's a human story, and she writes about Udham Singh, a man who was orphaned by the Jallianwala Bagh massacre and who took his revenge 20 years later. But I will not give away that story. I'll wait for you to talk about it. But I do want to say that it's a personal story for me as well as it is a personal story for Anita, because my great-grandfather was present when the massacre happened, and the story of Jallianwala Bagh has always been told in our family through his eyes. So it's a doubly special session for me. So I think I'm going to leave it to you. I'm going to get off stage, and I will be back with questions later.
Thank you so much, Aanchal. And it is a real privilege to have you as the moderator of this because of this, I mean, first of all, your understanding of this kind of history, but also because of that personal connection. It is a mutual, I mean, it's going to make you sick. We're fangirling over each other. It is repulsive, but, you know, necessary. So Aanchal's quite right. There is a personal connection for me as well to the story. I will tell you about that a little bit later. But what I want to start by telling you is that this was a really difficult book for me to write. And it was a book that I kept putting off and kept putting off. And yet knowing in the background that it was kind of inevitable that I would have to write it. So those of you who are Punjabi will know the name Udham Singh. It will be no mystery to you. I'm a little bit worried about this clicker because it appears to have gone mad. Is there any way you could go to the first slide, please? Is there any way you could? Thank you so much. So the patient assassin of this book is this man, Udham Singh, whose name literally, Udham, means the upheaval. He was an orphan brought up and saved by the city of Amritsar. Born to poverty, low caste, he was given up to an orphanage with his young brother, and he was raised and saved by the men who ran that orphanage. It is also, though, the story of two other men. Hopefully this will work, and if not, could you go to the next slide, please? This man is called Reginald Dyer. And for any of you who have watched the film Gandhi, this is the Edward Fox character. Reginald Dyer, otherwise known as Rex to those who loved him. And there were lots of people who loved him. And if you go to the next slide, please. The third man in this triumvirate of a story is Michael O'Dwyer, the Lieutenant Governor of Punjab at the time that the massacre in Jallianwala Bagh took place. Now, if you are a Punjabi, if you have any kind of association with this story, there are two names that will fill you with revulsion and terror and a mixture of all things negative, and that is the name Dyer and the name O'Dwyer. And for a while, I just kind of found it really paralyzing to even start thinking about these people using those names. And what I really didn't want to do is write a book that was two-dimensional, that there are bad men who do bad things and all of that is bad. I wanted to understand what made them able to do some of the most horrific things ever perpetrated in the name of colonialism. And to that end, I kind of had to rename them in my head. So Reginald Dyer I had to think of as Rex. Rex, the young boy who was born in India, who loved India, who spoke Hindustani frequently, of whom it was said he was so emotional that when he was a young boy, he apparently was trying to shoot at birds, shoots a monkey instead, and never gets over the pain when he looks at this monkey's eyes and its eyes of reproach. A sentimental man. And then you have this man, Michael. And he had to be Michael in my head. And Michael is a really unusual character. He was born of a Catholic Irish family, and he was brought up in Tipperary. So those of you who don't know Ireland, Ireland suffered greatly from famine and suffered greatly from British central rule. And the neighbours around the O'Dwyer family would have chafed under British rule for many, many years. They would have hated it. And there was a sense that the English should get out of Irish affairs among Michael's neighbours, among the neighbours of his father, John O'Dwyer, who he regarded as the finest of men, was an absolute hero to him. And John O'Dwyer was very unusual because he wasn't poor. All of the O'Dwyer neighbours were pretty much on their knees. Poverty was rampant around Tipperary. But John O'Dwyer owned land, he owned some horses, he owned some cattle, and he had enough money to send his 13 children to school. And Michael was an exceptional student right from the start. So at the age of around 7, he's sent away, like most boys of his class and caste, if you like, to be educated by Jesuits, miles away from home. So this little boy is sent away, and he's brought up in what is a fairly, we now look back, brutal regime of discipline. And indeed, he talks about it. He says, it was brutal, but Michael didn't mind it. He didn't mind the brutality at all because that's how you made a man. He also, with his mother's milk, drank in this feeling that John O'Dwyer projected and voiced frequently, that nationalism was chaos. That the nationalists around him that wanted England to get out of Ireland were wrong. They were hotheads. They were thugs. These are the words that he used of the Fenian Brotherhood, who were springing up and using sort of courses of violence to try and get the British to loosen their hold or get out altogether. John O'Dwyer, despite being an Irish Catholic, unlike most of the Irish Catholics who lived around him, hated nationalism, and so did his boy, Michael O'Dwyer. It's really important. Could you go to the... brilliant. It's really important to separate these people in your mind because so much of the legend of Udham Singh and the legend of these men has been completely twisted and warped beyond recognition. So if you go to Wikipedia, you will find that there is a composite character who people think is central to this story, a man called Michael Dyer, or Reginald O'Dwyer. They've smashed them together as if there's some kind of like Rakshas from the Hindu mythologies mixed together with two heads and numerous arms. They are two distinctive people with two distinctive passions and two distinctive upbringings. Michael, after he did very, very well at the school he was at, was sent to Balliol College in Oxford, where he also excelled. He exceeded all expectations of himself. And he was driven because he wanted to make a name for himself. If you weren't an aristocrat, if you didn't come from a great deal of money, the place to make your name, your fame, and a lot of money was India. And to get to India, the best way was to be an ICS officer. The Indian civil service never outnumbered 1,200 people, and yet they controlled millions. And Michael, when he was studying for the ICS, was brought up, as most of the ICS cadre, on the theory that 1857 is a heartbeat away. So before 1857, the relationship between Britain and Indians was one of doing deals. You could work together, you could chafe alongside each other, you would turn this prince against that prince because you like this prince better. After 1857 and the mutiny, suddenly there is a sea change in the attitude about the Indians. They're now natives, they're savages. They are a heartbeat away from drinking the blood of your children. Kanpur is the spectre that hangs low in the ICS, and at any cost, ICS officers are told this must never happen again. Michael does well at the ICS and is sent to India. And he loves India, absolutely loves India, but not Indians very much. What he loved was the pith helmet India, the Kipling India. In fact, you know, if any of you have been lucky enough to be in Lahore, it is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. It did not touch him one bit. He thought it was dirty, chaotic, the whole of Punjab was a mess. He liked Indians when they were in their place, and that is when they were in service to the British. They were weird and savage and unpredictable, the Indians. And he actually writes about them and catalogues them much as a botanist would catalogue poisonous species. So he would say broad brush things. For example, the Sikhs, they are very brave, but they are very greedy, and they are very stupid. The Bhils like to drink a lot. And the one type of Indian that he had the most scorn for, oh yes, you know, I forget I put this in a notes because it really is very hard to look at. This is a postcard that Westerners would send to each other. And the result of famine. And Michael would have seen this, and Michael would have known about these famines. But he believed, as many did in that cadre, that these misfortunes were the result of Indians doing this to themselves, and that white management would make things a lot better. The type of classification, just coming back to that, the type of Indian he hated more than any other was the educated Indian. They were the worst. And they usually came from the higher castes. They were usually the Brahmin castes who were educated and sent overseas, and they would come back with these high notions about having a say in the way their country was run. And to Michael, this was outrageous and against nature. This is not how things were meant to be. One in particular he loathed with a visceral passion. How many of you recognize this man here? Hands up if you recognize him. That's very good. When I do this in England, nobody gets it, and then I do the little teasing thing. You're right. It's Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, just as he was coming to India from South Africa, and he'd been called over by Gopakrishna Gokhale because of the non-violent struggle that had been so successful against pass laws in South Africa. And my God, Michael fixed on him immediately and hated his guts. It comes to the pinnacle of his career when he's told that he is going to be given Punjab to look after as the Lieutenant Governor. It is almost second only to the Viceroy's position, and he's taken aside. The Darbar, I'm sure most of you know, but for those of you who don't, was a very visual. Can you not move until I say, please? If you can go back, that would be great. Stay on the other picture. Thank you. Just stay there. I'll tell you when to move. The Darbar celebration was a visual symbol of British rule in India. So the King Emperor and his Queen would stand on a dais in a plain that was cleared as big as Delhi, next to Delhi. And every Nawab, Maharaja and Raja would be called upon to come and bow low before the King Emperor. Just a reminder of who ran the show in India. And it was at this coronation Darbar that Michael is taken to one side and told by Harding that you are going to be the next Lieutenant Governor of India, but be careful. Lieutenant Governor of Punjab, but be careful. Punjab is on the verge of erupting. You are going to have to do this with a very strong hand. That's why we've chosen you. And so Michael goes into this, sort of brought up on the fear of the mutiny. John O'Dwyer's son absolutely loathes the nationalists. He now has an extra reason to loathe nationalists because in Ireland, while he's been studying for the ICS, the nationalists have fired into the O'Dwyer home. And although they didn't hit his father and his sister, both of whom were inside, they caused so much stress to John that he has a catastrophic stroke and he dies. So for the rest of his days, Michael O'Dwyer equates that violence upon his father with what the nationalists are. And it all feeds into the opposite of what is a virtuous cycle. If you can go next picture. So as Lieutenant Governor, he had a wonderful, wonderful time. There are some pictures which I was just so thrilled to find because nobody had seen them before. If you look over here, can you go back, please, if that's all right? Thank you. This is Michael, hiding in the background. This is his wife in the front, in the pith helmet, and the little girl next to him is his daughter, Una, who he praises and prizes above any other human. That's their pet leopard, because of course every lieutenant governor needs a pet leopard. If you go forward, one more please. Michael has his time to shine with the declaration of the First World War, because the Indians are expected to give blood and coin for the cause. And Michael immediately says, you know what? Punjab is the sword hand of India. This classification that he enjoys doing of Indians, there are a great concentration of martial races, he says, in the Punjab. So he says, leave it to me, I will get you the men. And true to his word, he does. The Punjab contributes more than any other province to the war effort, sometimes voluntarily. It's a carrot and stick approach. So he promises wealth, he promises honor, he promises land to those who survive. And to those who die in battle, their families will get even more. And when that sort of starts drying up, he starts to weaponize the rivalry. This is kind of the very seed of what we now call divide and rule. But he would go to Muslim areas and he would say, you call yourselves men, look at how many Sikhs have come from the province. He will say to the Sikhs, look, those, you call yourself Sikhs, you should be ashamed of yourself. Look at what has been provided over there. He weaponizes the rivalry between Amritsar and Lahore, even going as far as saying to Lahore, if they don't buck up their ideas, he may actually change the capital of Punjab from Lahore to Amritsar, which is effective. And there is also talk, and I have it in the book, about press gangs turning up and men from villages just disappearing overnight because they hear that the khakis are coming in the morning and they're going to need carpenters. Next picture, please. One of the men who does sign up is Udham Singh, the patient assassin of my book. And the reason he signs up is the reason that many young men at the time signed up. No prospects, no money, no future, no idea. Because Udham Singh, I mentioned, was delivered unto an orphanage because he loses his parents, both parents, before he reaches the age of 5. He comes from a family which has no money. None of his family can look after him. And so these two boys, he and his brother, who's only just a year and a half older than him, are delivered to the orphanage. And he is traumatized. I mean, now we know about the psychology of separation anxiety and all of that, but there are accounts that he would go around the orphanage always holding his brother's hand. And he loses his brother in the orphanage too. His brother dies of illness. So there he is, 17 years of age. He has nothing. Nobody has him. Nobody has his back. And the only person who's ever loved him and known him has died. And he hears this cry that O'Dwyer is sending out around Punjab, go and be a man, make your name, fight for king and country. And he signs up, even though he's too young to join up. He finds a recruitment officer who has no scruples about sending him, and he is an unmitigated failure. So far from earning himself riches and land and honor, it turns out very quickly that he has the personality that does not take orders very well, and especially doesn't take orders from white superior officers. And so he's sent back ignominiously, and he still has nothing. A lot of men come back where they have made their names, and they come back to an India which is as restrictive as the one that they left. Gandhi has also been doing the rounds as a recruitment officer at this time, almost as energetically as Michael O'Dwyer himself. This is something that people don't talk about Gandhi, but Gandhi signed up heart and spirit to the war effort. He, at some point, actually offered to go and fight himself. He said, okay, and then people reminded him, his South African friends, you don't believe in violence. How is it that you're offering to go and fight? He said, oh, right, no, you're right. So what I'll do is I'll take regiments of Indian men, and right at the time, we will just lay down our arms. And if the Germans want to shoot us, they can shoot us, but through our example, they will learn that, it was all crazy, and people thought there was something very, very wrong. But he was a chief recruitment officer at that time, and he also told Indians, if you do this, if you sign up, if you fight, they will let us loose a bit. They will loosen their hold. They will be grateful. But when the men who do survive come back, they don't see gratitude. What they have in place of the draconian war legislation, the Defence of the Realm Act, is the Rowlatt Act, which continues those powers that if you If you criticize the British, you can be thrown in prison, no trial. Habeas corpus is suspended. Sedition can be launched at anybody. You can be dragged out in the night and thrown into a prison cell. You will never know. And Sir Michael uses the Rowlatt Act like a blunt instrument. And of course, there are men who don't come back. And so you have these waves of loss and pain which come floating back from people who will never be able to cremate their sons or bury them or read prayers over their bodies. And the anger builds up. It's not weird to expect the anger to build up. This is not what we signed up for. And what does Sir Michael do? One would think you release the valve to release that anger. He doubles down. He rounds up enormous numbers of men. Could you go to the next, please? And of course, when men see this, they've come back from fighting, and they see this, the rage simmers and simmers in a container that has no valve. Next slide, please. Amritsar is one of his greatest bugbears, because at Amritsar there is fury. Amritsar, you know, but for those of you who are not familiar with Punjab, it is the home of the Golden Temple, which is the most holy shrine of the Sikhs. And Michael is convinced that either Lahore or Amritsar are going to blow on his watch, and he's going to stop it from happening. And to that end, he decides that Gandhi should be banned from Punjab. And Gandhi has been invited to come and speak in Amritsar by two non-violent Gandhian followers, Satyapal and Kichlu, who would like him to come because they know the anger that's building up. They see it. They want to have some concessions from the British, but not this way, not through violence. So they want Gandhi to come and show them a different way. And Sir Michael stops him. The train is coming into Punjab. He has the train stopped. Gandhi is taken off. And he's sent back from whence he came, but nobody knows that. And the rumor just goes out that he's been taken. And these are people now who are they are used to what the Rowlatt Act does and how people disappear. And so there is rage that radiates out from this arrest. And it boils over in Amritsar. Go to the next, please. And there are days and days of violence. One of the things that particularly has shaken Michael is the fact that Ram Navami, which is a Hindu festival, his representative has told him that Hindus and Muslims are drinking from the same pots and they are holding hands and they are parading through the streets. Where once they shouted Hindu phrases, now they're saying Gandhi Ji Ki Jai. And that really scares him. And so he decides, after these days of violence, in one day of it is to him, it is absolutely the sign that there's going to be a mutiny because there's violence against a woman. So when the two leaders, Satyapal and Kichlu, rather than talking to them, the two men who could keep Amritsar under control, they are instead they're arrested and spirited out of the city, and nobody knows what's happened to them either, and things blow. A bunch of pleaders go to try and find out where their leaders have gone, and the troops open fire. And a rumor goes out that the bodies are taken to the hospital bleeding and broken, and a female doctor, Dr. Easton, laughs and refuses to treat them. And so the mobs now are on the rampage. They're setting fire to things. They are burning things. Two bank managers are brutally killed in Amritsar. And they find a woman in the streets who they assume is Dr. Easton. She's not. She's Marcella Sherwood. She's an absolutely innocent missionary who's on her bicycle, and they take her off her bike and they beat her, thinking they've beaten her to death. And they leave. She's in the dirt. She's not dead, and it is thanks to an Indian family that she is saved at all. And when the thugs come back, they are directed somewhere else and she's spirited out. But Michael thinks, okay, they're turning against women. This is Kanpur again. This is what happens. So he decides to have some direct action, and the direct action comes in the shape of Rex Dyer, who is not from Amritsar. He's stationed in Jalandhar. He hasn't even been in Jalandhar very long, but Rex is a man of action. Rex believes, just as Sir Michael does, that Amritsar needs to be brought to heel. Who the hell do these people think they are? They're not even salaaming the sahibs in the street anymore. What is going on? How has it become so slack in Amritsar? And so he goes. Of Rex, they say he's the kind of man who would charge over a stockade with a pistol hanging from his teeth. He thinks last, acts first. And he rocks up in Amritsar. And he immediately says, right, there are going to be some changes around here. We're not going to have public meetings. We're not going to have association. We are going to drive through the streets and make our presence known. And he does this thing where he sends out a drum proclamation, where he sends drummers to different parts of the city to tell the people of Amritsar how things are going to change now that Rex is in town. Now, I don't know how many are any of you from Amritsar? Hands up if you are. Okay, then you won't mind, because I have family in Amritsar. It's called the City of Crows among Punjabis because we don't talk. Amritsaris don't talk, they yell at each other. It is a noisy city. It is labyrinthine. It's an old medieval city, lots of twisty, turny lanes. A drum proclamation is not going to reach many people. But for Rex, that is enough. He has done it. He has said anybody congregating illegally will be shot. And then he gets to hear that there is going to be a meeting. Despite his drum proclamation, despite his wishes, in defiance of him and therefore the Raj, at a place called Jallianwala Bagh. Next slide, please. So Jallianwala Bagh, if any of you have been, looks the same as it did then. This is a photograph taken in 1919. It has a narrow entrance. 3 men walking abreast would be hard pushed to go in. And it is surrounded, about the size of 4 football pitches, surrounded by tenement buildings, which hem the place in. And there are little narrow gullies between some of the buildings, but really one major entrance and exit. And Rex has chosen to make his stand against this illegal political meeting that he has heard and seen flyers have been distributed about. And this meeting, by the way, has been called to discuss what to do about Satyapal and Kichlu. And he decides, right, this is where we're going to sort this out. You know, he could have put men by the entrance. He could have stopped people coming in, but he didn't. He sits and he waits. And then when the appointed time comes, he makes his move from his headquarters at the Rambagh. Meanwhile, inside here, there are 20,000 unarmed men, women, and children. 20,000 unarmed civilians are here. Some are here for the political meeting. A lot are here because this is the busiest festival in Punjab, a festival called Vaisakhi, which is the festival of the harvest. People pour in from all over Punjab because they give thanks at the Golden Temple for the harvest. They also come together. There is a horse fair, there is a cattle fair, and it's a time to do deals. You know, people are there, they're in a good mood. It's a time to start again. And that is why my personal connection to this story, that is why my grandfather came to be in Jallianwala Bagh on the day in question. He was a kid. He was just a kid who grew up in a place called Kalabagh in the mountains near Peshawar, and who'd come down to make his dad proud. To do a sewing machine deal. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like, you know, it would be much nicer for me to say he was a freedom fighter and he was there and he was fine. He wasn't. He was there to do a deal to make his dad proud. Rex Dyer drives his convoy to the entrance, and he's really angry he can't get his machine gun-mounted vehicle into the Bagh. And later it transpires that if he would have done, he would have used the machine guns too. Instead, he marches his 50 riflemen, Gurkhas and Balochis. And next slide, please. And he tells them to take their position. Next slide, please. On this bank here. And there's a scramble. So the people who are sort of near the political meeting start to panic and start packing things away. One man, I mean, there are a lot of ex-army who are there. You know, there are a lot of people from Amritsar who did go and fight for the British, start shouting to the crowd, get down, get down. If you're down, they won't shoot. There is no order to disperse, no time given. the order is given to fire, and fire, and fire, and fire. 20,000 innocent people, and fire. 1,650 bullets, and fire. 10 minutes of sustained shooting. Not over heads, but at chest and head height. Not into the middle of a void, but riflemen are ordered to swivel and fire into the thickest parts of the crowd. So bodies are building up in pyramids by the perimeter wall. And then as quickly as they came, they leave. Can you go to the next slide? My grandfather, who had been in that garden, had left 5 minutes before Rex Dyer arrived and remembered passing the column in the street. He was an out-of-towner, so he thought Amritsar maybe is always this heavily policed by the military. Didn't know. He was going to the market to get some sewing machines. He'd left his 2 friends, who were Amritsaris, with the lunch that they were meant to hold for him. And he said, I'm going to be back in a little while. And the first thing he knows of what has happened in this garden is the wailing that sweeps across the market. And he rushes back. And he can't get near because there are soldiers on the street. And so he hides. He goes and he runs and he hides. And to his eternal shame, he is scared and he cries and he thinks of his mum. And he, like so many other people, wait until morning to find out their loved ones are dead because Rex Dyer, as well as doing this, declares a curfew. So people can't come and take the bodies out. They can't get help to the people that they love. And there are harrowing accounts. Many are in the book. And if you are not of strong constitution, don't read it, because they're awful. Next slide, please. According to legend, there was another young man, similar age to my grandfather, who was in the garden, and that was Udham Singh, the orphan, the failed soldier, who was also there. The man in the middle, the tall one, there. And according to the legend, which is so well known in India, he's trapped in the garden and he hears the screaming turning to whimpering, turning to silence. And he grabs a clod of blood-soaked earth as the first lights hit the ground, and he says, no matter how long it takes, no matter where it takes me, I'm going to find the men who did this, and I'm going to kill them with as little mercy as they've shown my countrymen. Next slide. And this is the story that I tell. The patient assassin is this man who has no means, he has no support, he has no network, he's the poorest of the poor. He has very little education, nobody takes him seriously, and it's how he, like a real-life Tom Ripley, will spend the next 20 years of his life like a magpie, following the adage, my enemy's enemy is my friend. He will learn whatever he can from whoever hates the British as much as he does. And next slide, please. And I'm just going to just give you a whiz, because how long have I got? Because I could go on and on and on for hours. How long have I got? 5 more minutes of chatting, and then we'll do questions and answers. So what he does is he, first of all, becomes a bag boy for the nationalists around Amritsar, but he wants to do more. But he needs to feed himself. So he travels on this slipstream to Africa, where he works like many indentured labor. They pretty much, people are given loans to go and work on this railway that stretches from Uganda to Kenya, called the lunatic line, because you have to be a lunatic to work on it. And he starts working with these very expendable Indian laborers. Disease takes them, lions take them. There's a very good picture I'll show you later if I can. I can't, unfortunately, have no control over this, but there are these 2 famous lions who are taking hundreds of workers away on this line. And through them he meets anti-colonialists. And the anti-colonialists see something in him that nobody in Amritsar has seen in him, potential and rage and hatred. And they say, go to America. Because there is a movement there, the Ghadars, who have come from Punjab. They've been thrown out and persecuted by Michael O'Dwyer, and they will teach you, and they will mold you. And so that is what he does. And this is the story that I tell of how he ends up in America. And he comes into contact with these people, and they do trust him, and they do give him things to do. He's sort of a money mule, and he's doing these very mysterious trips across Europe and coming back and doing another trip and traveling under the name Frank Brazil, a Puerto Rican seaman, getting work wherever he can, but also finding love. He finds a woman called Lupe, a Mexican woman. He finds love, he settles down, he has children, but you know what? This is the chance for this man who had nothing to be happy. But he doesn't take it, because like the Princess and the Pea, this thing is always under his mattress. No matter how long it takes, no matter where it takes me, I'm going to kill the men who did this with as little mercy as they showed me. If you can skip forward just a little bit, there's a newspaper headline. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff here, and just while you're going, I'm sorry, I talk too much and too long, and I get too involved in all this. But people talk about the massacre as if it happened in isolation, as if it was the worst thing, the monstrous act that Churchill calls it, this monstrous act, as if it was a one-off. Stop there, if you would. And you know, it wasn't. Because around that, and the days after the massacre, one would think that a chastened lieutenant governor would think this was the most monstrous thing in the world, and Michael O'Dwyer would again relax, let the valve out. Nothing like it. Again, doubles down, sends warplanes to strafe civilians from the sky, has people picked up and rounded up in Amritsar who are suspected. There's no proof, there's no trial, there's nothing, no due process, but anyone who might be suspected of attacking Marcella Sherwood, there are flogging triangles set up around Amritsar, and they're strapped to them, and they are beaten to unconsciousness in front of their families and their friends and their neighbours. And there's more, and there's more. So this rage that's building up in Udham Singh, there are hundreds and hundreds of Udham Singhs being born in the wake of that massacre. They say the massacre was the beginning of the end of the Raj. I'll skip forward just a little bit, and then we can talk, shall we? Because there's so much more. That, if you go back one of the things that Udham Singh does in his work for those who, one more back, please, against the British, is he starts gun running for them. And in 1927, it's kind of almost a farcical story. He is always his own downfall. So whether it's pride or vanity, he gets caught again and again and released again and again because people underestimate him, because how can this uneducated, rough man be of any threat at all? In 1927, he's actually serving a prison sentence for gun running. And that, I think, is when everything becomes too much. You know, he has this chance of being happy, he has this chance of having a life, and he rejects it because this is the funeral cortege of Rex Dyer, who, despite coming back to England and being made the scapegoat for Jallianwala Bagh, pretty much the only one who is blamed and has to lose his army position over this, and who never gets over it, by the way, who suffers greatly because of it, by the way. There's a story in the book from his family, from his daughter-in-law, about an electrical storm. So he suffered he has arterial sclerosis when he comes back. He fades away. He hates all of the attention. He doesn't understand, what did he do wrong? What did he do? He was doing his duty. And it comes to this night in 1927, and there's this electrical storm over this hideaway house that the Dyers have bought for Rex, just to hide him away and keep him safe from the world. And Phyllis is there, and he's had a stroke. He can't really speak very well. He can't move very well. He is a shadow of a man. He's lost his Indian tan. He looks like a ghost. And Phyllis says, "Don't worry, this will pass," meaning the storm. And Rex Dyer says, "I don't want it to pass. Some say I did right, some say I did wrong. I just want to meet my maker and find out." So that is the funeral procession given to the man responsible for Jallianwala Bagh. Udham Singh is in prison. He sees this. He knows about it. So there's only one man left, and that man is Michael O'Dwyer. And let's just say, I've run out of time, but it's worth seeing how he gets his man, and gets him in the heart of London, in Westminster, ironically in a place that is as far away from the Houses of Parliament as Jallianwala Bagh is from the Golden Temple. And Michael O'Dwyer, I'll tell you one part of it. I mean, it's the way he does it, the way he's become this perfect assassin, the only brown man capable of walking in like a ghost. Nobody notices him. Of being capable of walking so close in the time of war in 1940 to get so close to Michael O'Dwyer that he can put his gun at point-blank range up to this man and shoot him twice, 2 parallel trajectories through the heart, and leave him to die and bleed to death, just as so many did in the garden that day. Thank you very much.
It's a lot to go on after. Okay. So Anita, you've talked a lot about what happened and what you have in the book, and a couple of things that I thought of when you were talking were, what is the public memory of Jallianwala Bagh? You know, I study partition, I'm a scholar of partition, and partition is still talked about, but Jallianwala Bagh is not. And it's quite interesting because if you look at the chronology that you're studying, World War I happened, 1.5 million soldiers went. Their stories are also forgotten. They thought they would return to India to gain something. And yet they came, Afghan war happened, 1919 Jallianwala Bagh happened, and you're right, things are simmering. But how, and then the crawling order and the public flogging.
Right.
Which
Right.
is something you didn't touch on, but is very,
I didn't.
very
There's a picture of the
interesting.
crawling order. I talk about that. That's like, you know, the ultimate humiliation, the alleyway where Marcella Sherwood was attacked. Dyer himself says, right, people are going to have to go through that alleyway on their bellies and crawl like worms. And there are pictures, and some are in the book, of British soldiers with, you know, standing there around them, and they are very reminiscent of the kind of pictures we've seen more recently coming out of Guantanamo Bay with soldiers holding up men in stress positions. It's like a trophy thing. It's appalling. But yes, sorry, do go. I just wanted to explain what that was.
So let's start with this. In my family, I never knew a Jallianwala Bagh story existed. I had to prod, and it came out almost accidentally. And this is how it is in a lot of Punjabi families, especially those that were based in Amritsar. My grandfather was there, a great-grandfather was there for Vaisakhi. He had gone to celebrate. The shooting started, and when you're describing right now, fire, 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 this is exactly how my grandfather described to me how his father told him about it. Fire.
So I said that my grandfather never got over the fact that in the morning when he came back, his friends were dead and he was alive. I don't know whether I told you that he went blind. My father was the youngest by far of his children, and so spent the most time with him. And everybody else I know would describe, I had to get bits from people. You know, he told people little bits and pieces. I never knew him, sadly. He died before I was born, but again, a huge figure, because he went blind very, very young. And whenever anyone came to do absoos, to pity, you know, say sorry that you've lost your sight or you're losing your sight, he would get really angry. A very mild, quiet man, but got furious, and he would say, do not pity me. God spared my life that day, it's only right. He takes the light from my eyes. And now we call that survivor's guilt. We have words and phrases for it, but at the time, people knew that he wasn't a happy man and that he was a quiet man. But it's only sort of later that you talk to different people and you say, yeah, this is what he said, this is what he was there, you know, that's where. And it was a really strange thing, cathartic for me and my family, because I was able to share that story with my family, and, you know, people just knew bits of it, to be honest.
What is interesting about Jallianwala Bagh is that it's also in General Dyer's family. And we talked yesterday about how when you finished the manuscript, you got in touch with General Dyer's granddaughter.
Yeah, so it's a bit more complicated. So yes, you're right. So a friend of mine had said, I know you're writing this book, I've got a number for this relative of Dyer. Do you want to talk to her? And I said, I really, really don't. Not until I finish the book, because if I like her, it's going to change the way I write this. And if I don't like her, it's going to change the way I write this. And I'm a journalist, and I really, really try hard to keep sort of the emotional side out of it and be objective about things. But it was the day I handed in the manuscript. I remember it so clearly, and I rang her up. And I present programs at the BBC, so I have a name that some people recognize. So I rang her up, and I said, oh, hello. My name's Anita Anand, I present blah, blah. She said, oh, yes, I know who you are. Yes, I listen to you. I said, oh, right, that's wonderful. That's not why I'm ringing. Your grandfather tried to kill my grandfather. Would you like to have a cup of tea? So the most British thing in the world. And to her credit, she said, yes, I would love it. So I said, oh, shit. Okay. Oh, okay, would you want to come to my house? And she said, yes. I was like, oh, okay. So she came to the house, and I bought the very best brownies that my hometown has to offer. And she sort of came in, and she was really happy to be there, but I offered her a brownie, and she sort of said, like, laughingly, she said, are they poisoned? And I laughed, and then I thought, I said, oh, are you serious? And she said, well, you don't know. I mean, I don't really know. I mean, I know your story. I said, well, would you like me to eat half? And she said, yeah, go on then. And it was like the weirdest tea party I hope to ever attend. But we chatted, we got on well, and she was, she's very funny and she's very poised. But then the most horrific thing happened. I said, what about this massacre business? And she said he did the right thing. And I wasn't expecting it at all. It was like being punched in the stomach. I wanted to be sick. She said he did the right thing. I don't know why. He was following his duty, and I was like, you can't be serious. You cannot be serious. Can I just read you something? She goes, oh, that's propaganda. That's kind of fake news. I was like, it's not. It's come from the British sources. I've been researching this for years. Can I just read you? She goes, I don't want to hear it. I said, right, okay. So you don't know where to go from there. I said, well, I don't know why you're so sure when he wasn't so sure. And I'd found this document, which is in the book. I'm so proud of it. It's from an Anglophile Indian who was studying in Britain. You've come across the Kripalani Memoir. So Kripalani, a lot of the stuff is not of great interest, but when he's in the Oxford Union one day with his friends, it's sort of around 1923, and the subject of Jallianwala Bagh comes up, and he's talking to an English student, and he's there, and he gets really, really angry, which if you read the Kripalani memoirs is not what he's like, but he gets furious. And the volume goes up, and he goes, the man's a murderer, he's a monster, he should have been hanged. And just out the corner of his eye, he notices there's somebody leaning a little bit in. And they carry on, and then suddenly this man gets up, and he's sort of very, very sort of frail-looking elderly gentleman, and walks over. And he said, I'm sorry, I heard what you were talking about. You were talking about the massacre. What do you think of Dyer? And off goes Kripalani again. He's a monster, he should be hanged. And this man says, I am that unfortunate man. And then walks off. And Kripalani goes, oh, God, it's only then I realized his is the face. I've been looking at the newspapers all this time. And I said to her, he had doubt. He had doubt. The thing he said to Phyllis, he had doubt, why don't you? And she said one thing which every Indian in particular will understand, but he's my family. And here we are. And, she sent me a Christmas card this year. I don't know what to do with these things. I really don't. They're like really... but I did say, if you want to come... You're so wrong about this, so wrong. Will you come with me to Jallianwala Bagh? And she said, yeah, but it's not happened, and I don't know when it will happen. I don't know if I want to do it. I don't even know. I don't know where I am with that. Anyway, long answer to that question. I'm so sorry.
No, but it's a great segue, because I was going to ask you whether you've been to the Bagh in recent years and what you think of it, because when I went there, I thought I would feel this kind of, the souls of everyone. There's nothing, right?
So I know what you mean. So they've done some very strange things.
Sanitation.
Yeah, very, very strange things. But so it's green now, where it would have been dusty and red before. And there's topiary. The thing that I can't really reconcile myself to is that there are soldier topiary hedges. And because this is India, they're all meant to have rifles. They're all wilting, so they're shooting themselves in the foot, or they're like kind of wilting and shooting into a cloud. And that just, to me, it detracts from what that place means to me. But I had a different response, because I have 2 young boys. And the last time I went, I took them. I've been a few times for research. And they were having a picnic. And I just looked at them and I just thought, 10 minutes, firing 1,650 bullets. And that really, just that, and just seeing that there's still no way out, and that kind of killed me, actually. Really did kill me.
So I want to ask one last question and then we can open it up to the audience. In December, in India, December of last year, Section 144 was imposed on many cities of the country. Now, just for those of you who don't know, Section 144 is the unlawful, Unlawful congregation of more than 4 people, which is what the Rowlatt Act was.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Gosh.
And when Section 144 was imposed, the first thing I thought of was, my God, it's 2019. We used this in 1919. So my question is this. What would Udham Singh make of India today? Because I know we went quite quickly through the slides, but when he was in custody, he used a very interesting name which encompassed all the religions of syncretic Punjab.
Well, I think it's very interesting. You kind of answered part of the question. I mean, I'm a visitor, and as somebody who comes, I won't have anything of great value, but I can tell you about him and what he would have thought about an India that is only Hindu. When he was arrested for the murder of Michael O'Dwyer, the police said, "What's your name?" And he said, "My name is Mohammed Singh Azad," which would have meant absolutely nothing to the arresting officer and didn't mean anything until they researched and they realized what his name was. And then there was this enormous effort, it's all in the book, of let's find out who he really is. We cannot call him this. Because Mohammed is a Muslim name, Singh is a Sikh name, Azad means freedom. And the symbolism was very clear. I am doing this for you, and you are India. So that's what I can say about that.
Okay, shall we open it up to questions? Okay, let's start at the beginning and then we can make our way there. Let's start here.
So I wonder where you strike the balance between the historical fact and the legend in your book, because you've repeated the story that Udham Singh was there on the day itself.
I say legend has it.
Yes.
I'm very careful about what I say.
No, so I'm wondering in the book what you make of that part of the story.
So I put the legend, and you'll see the legend embodied outside Jallianwala Bagh. Now they've erected a statue, which is exactly that image of him holding his hand out heavy with the blood-soaked earth of his countrymen. And I meticulously try to find out where he is at this time. Because there are historians before who have said categorically, he wasn't there, he wasn't even in India. And I traced back to where they had based that, and they are wrong. And I have shown in the book where they are wrong with citations. I mean, it's the most there's so many citations in it. I thought I might have to get a caravan to bring the citations along at the back of the book. And the British at the time of the murder were desperate in 1940 to divorce him from Jallianwala Bagh as a motive. And they knew that that's what people were saying, that's what he was telling people, that it was because of Jallianwala Bagh. And all that they could do with all of their hands on war records, police records, special branch records, MI5 records, IPI records, all they could say is, we cannot say with any certainty that he was there. If they would have had a shred of evidence to say that he was somewhere else, we would have heard it in 1940. So many of those records are now dead and buried, and so I did the best I could to show what I could, and I could say there's no certainty. But what I do say with absolute certainty is he may not have been the man in the garden with a clod of earth. Who knows? He knows. I don't know. But Jallianwala Bagh transformed him, and he was reborn into what he then became, the patient assassin.
Yeah, there you go. Let's take one here.
First of all, let me congratulate you as the writer of this wonderful book, which I read, I think, just at the time when the book appeared in the market. It has nostalgic memories for me, born in Lahore before partition and escaping with my mom and dad. I only missed a little honor at this point in time to the great man as Bhagat Singh. I'm sure Udham Singh must have been inspired by Bhagat Singh.
Well, it's in the book. He
Yes.
calls Bhagat Singh his guru. And he, at some point, actually takes out the photograph of his wife from his wallet that he has carried around, and he puts Bhagat Singh's picture in it instead. And he actually converts to atheism because Bhagat Singh is an atheist. And he says that this man has shown me the way. Even at the end, when he's writing these clandestine and coded letters to people at the end, he says, that is the day that I lost my love, which is the day that Bhagat Singh was executed. And he says, let my day be the same day this year, kind of thing.
Well, now that you said the word Bhagat Singh, I can tell you my father was in the night vigil when Bhagat Singh was hanged in the central jail of Lahore. Wow. And you can tell me, I can tell you, and then you can add on to that. You can imagine from my birth in Lahore till just a week before 15th August 1947, I have seen a railway compartment at the Lahore Central Station full of bodies, which I shouldn't have seen at my age.
And I'm sorry.
Do you know that?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
That doesn't matter. I just want to tell you that Amritsar is still not just the Golden Temple, but everybody, all of you here, please do visit the Partition Museum,
oh, yes.
which is really,
okay. Yeah.
really a must.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks. And you know, you say it doesn't matter, it matters a lot. And the thing that I've been saying a lot in Britain is that why aren't we teaching this in schools? I mean, I was born and brought up in Britain, and I've said this before on record. I can tell you about Tudor houses, a hypercaust system, and crop rotations. But are we taught about something that happened as recently as 100 years ago? And we know how to do things 100 years ago. There were massive celebrations of the centenary at the end of World War I. It is not that long ago. So.
Let's take a question here at the front. Right here at the front. Yeah.
Thank you. This question just came to me when you mentioned section 144, and it's a little difficult for me to ask this, so I'll try to be as lucid as possible while asking this. So I come from Ahmedabad in Gujarat, and Ahmedabad has been a city that has been perpetually imposed under section 144, which we are currently fighting against. And very recently, after the violence against universities in Delhi erupted, we organized a protest that was called Fighting the General Dyer of Delhi. And I think around 200 of us were detained for that. There are so many events happening right now, at least in the last 2 months. Section 144, as you mentioned, and the exoneration and not, identifying all the perpetrators of violence out here in India. So are there any other remnants of 1919 India under colonization and General Dyer that you see currently happening in India?
I can tell you about echoes that I see. I'm not here, and I don't believe in lecturing about things I don't know about, and I should not, and I will not do that. I can tell you about things I do know about. So I do know about things like changing the news and meddling with truth, because at the time that Udham Singh did what he did, the British were at great pains to hashtag fake news that whole situation. They sat on Reuters. Reuters was entirely complicit in not reporting what was going on in that trial. The trial was compromised. People were lent on. And there's also, echoes of things like Russian interference. The Russians were big players in the Udham Singh story, and I sort of go into that. And this chafing of new powers to find their feet in the world. So to me, at times, I was kind of like, God, am I just imposing this on here, or is it really there? So I can tell you about those mirrors, but I'm really grateful for you sharing your story. Thank you.
Maybe we just have time for one more question. Let's take the lady at the front.
Hello. I am a research scholar on partition, and obviously I've read Aanchal Malhotra's book, Remnants of Partition. And Ms. Anand, I found your talk extremely illuminating. And my question goes to both of you. Since you talked about partition in your book, and you talk about Jallianwala Bagh, and both these instances are almost, we get a monochromatic historiographical evidence in the books we read in schools. We don't know a lot about these historical events. So how difficult was it for both of you to write about these events, considering you have a personal history, and then there is this part of history when people do not talk about Jallianwala Bagh. We celebrate Independence Day, we celebrate Republic Day, but we do not have a specific day to celebrate these events. So how difficult was it for you to negotiate with this difficult history on a personal level and on the different public level?
So I separate my personal stuff completely when I'm writing, because otherwise you just wouldn't write anything of any value at all. Then you might as well just shout and wave your arms around on a soapbox, and I'm just not very good at that or interested in that. And there are lots of documents which were meant to be sealed in perpetuity, and the dogged attempts of people in Britain with FOI, Freedom of Information requests, have loosened those bounds. So I was privy to documents that nobody had ever seen before, some of which were only released in 2016. You know, the British were very, very good at bureaucracy. And so you look for the documents that are marked top secret, top secret, confidential top secret. And then you look for the letters of names and initials of people who you know are really important, like Major Vernon Kell, who was the head of MI5, who also plays a very central role in the Udham Singh story. So, you know, I went about it like a journalist. That's what I did. And, you know, when you're a journalist, you talk to living people and you interview them. When you are a historian, then all of your sources are dead. You go through archive, and you still hear their voices, and they just whisper to you from dusty boxes, but you find them.
So I'm an oral historian. I work with people's stories, and like I said at the very beginning, to talk of partition and to talk of Jallianwala Bagh is so different because they are remembered differently in public memory. And I wish, I wonder if anyone is recording stories of Jallianwala Bagh, or maybe because now you can only do second and third generation recollections.
So there are some really interesting archives which I've used in the book, which are oral archives. So there was one who was a guy called Nazir Matu, who was a friend of Udham Singh when he was in England and was part of that peddler network, and tells this amazing story of, you know, Udham threatening to shoot a police officer while they're out driving on these strange and mysterious missions that he would go through. And it was always testing this guy's resolve. And you have that on an audio, you know. And then you have other, I spoke to people whose fathers and grandfathers knew him. And that's, you know, that's an extraordinary thing. And people who'd written things at the time, contemporaneous things which are in attics and things. So, yeah, there were sources from everywhere and all over the place.
Well, there was also an extraordinary poem written called Khuni Vaisakhi.
We're talking about that tomorrow. I'm doing that session tomorrow with Navdeep. Come to that, yeah.
That's
Navdeep
right.
Suri, yeah.
So that's a poem leading up to Jallianwala Bagh and after it as well, which was banned by the British government and kind of found later, 60 years later or something. So, I mean, I don't know, I always wonder about Jallianwala Bagh because this is a story that I just chanced upon in my family because no one ever mentioned it. And it's so weird because this is a gigantic massacre that took place, and to just say it in passing.
And it's funny how people also took the lie here in this country about Udham Singh, you know, the hashtag fake newsery that went on at the time, which is we have to paint him as a lone wolf, lunatic, who got lucky, who was a fool and a buffoon. That was confected. You see that being created in memos where they say this is what we must do to him. This is how we must paint him. Under no circumstances can he be a nationalist hero. He's not allowed to speak. Nothing he says must leak out. And all of the pains that were taken to stop him being who he was, you can see it. But for many, many years, India took it and bought it, and that's what they said. So either he was this great god who single-handedly cut through British lines and, you know, killed this composite Michael Dyer, or he was the nutter who got lucky. And neither of those is true.
So I have one final question. Last year was 100 years of Jallianwala Bagh, and there was a lot of talk in Britain on apology, and I don't know what that means, really. Do you?
Well, you know, an apology is not going to help my grandfather or any of those
That's
other
what I
people,
thought.
but an acknowledgement would be a start. a really clean acknowledgement of it. I know David Cameron sort of wrote this is a monstrous event. Everyone keeps saying it's a monstrous event as if it's the only thing. Well, just teach what colonialism was in schools, would you? That would be a really good thing to do. That would be a fantastic legacy. Just do that. That would be nice. That's all I want you to do. Do that.
Thank you. Thank you very much to Anita Anand and Aanchal Malhotra for that wonderful session. And a reminder that they will be signing their books out in our book signing tent, which is outside our venue to the left by the Mughal tent area.